Welcome to another edition of Whiskey, Games, and Nerd Stuff. Today's whiskey is, I went ahead and got another batch and bottle, monkey-shouldered, lazy old-fashioned, because I wanted an old-fashioned, and I was feeling kind of lazy. And today I was going to talk a little bit more about a book that I have been reading, Playing with Reality, How Games Shaped Our World by Kelly Clancy. Let me go ahead and pour this drink out. The nice thing is about these bottles is you can usually get at least 2 drinks, depending on how much you pour. Let's go ahead and take a sip. I really enjoy that. Really, really good. If you find these, I would recommend getting these. I've always enjoyed these. So the book is Playing with Reality, How Games Have Shaped Our World by Kelly Clancy. I'm going to go ahead and read the jacket, and then I'll kind of talk about it a little bit. Let's see if I can kind of read through this without slaughtering too many of the words. An urgent assessment of how games came to dominate modern thought and what's at stake when we forget what games we're really playing. We play games to learn about the world, to understand our minds and the minds of others, and to practice making predictions about the future. Games are an essential aspect of humanity and a powerful tool for modeling reality. They're also a lot of fun. But games can be dangerous, especially when we mistake the model worlds of games for reality itself and let gamification co-opt human decision-making. Playing with Reality explores the riveting history of games since the Enlightenment, weaving an unexpected path through military theory, political science, evolutionary biology, the development of computers and AI, cutting-edge neuroscience, and cognitive psychology. Neuroscientist and physicist Kelly Clancy shows how intertwined games have been with the arc of history. War games shaped the outcome of real wars in the 19th and 20th century Europe. Game theory wrapped our understanding of human behavior and brought us to the brink of annihilation, and yet still underlines basic assumptions in economics, politics, technology, and design. We use games to teach computers how to learn for themselves, and now we are designing games that will determine the shape of society and the future of democracy. In this revelatory new work, Clancy makes the bold argument that the human fascination with games is key to understanding our nature. And this is the author. Let me go ahead and take another sip. So anybody who's watched this channel knows that I read quite a bit. And I go through a lot of books, articles, and whatnot. And one of the things that I wanted to do with Whiskey, Games, and Nerd Stuff was when I came across a book or an article that I find interesting, I'll talk about it. Just with the thought that maybe somebody else will find it interesting. So you'll probably see a couple of videos on this book. There's been a few of these books that I've done that where I've read it, gone through it, and talked about it. And what I liked and didn't like. So let's go ahead and kind of go through this the first little bit. And this is one of those things where I can definitely say if you enjoy games, whether just playing the games, learning about the history of games, review games, anything to do with games, this is definitely a book I think you should have on your bookshelf. There's a lot of interesting things in here, a lot of good, interesting topics. And there's definitely some things in here that I've highlighted that have already been some conversation topics with some friends of mine. Here's one particular sentence in here that I at first thought was kind of interesting. It was right at the beginning. It was, a pacifist cannot win Call of Duty without shooting in-game enemies. A socialist cannot win Monopoly without adopting capitalist behaviors. Similarly, and I know I'm going to say this part wrong, Rithmakasha seduced its players with the beauty of Pythagorean ideas. I say that word every time. So somebody in the comment section, Pythagorean, I say it wrong every time. Anybody who watches this channel knows that I have a little bit of dyslexia, and sometimes I cannot just say these words. Pythagorean is the word I've been trying to say. So I thought it was kind of interesting because, it's a good point. If you're a pacifist, you can't win by not shooting people. If you're socialist, you can't win at playing the Monopoly. And the interesting thing is, if memory serves me, the original creator of Monopoly she had created it. I think she was a socialist and created it as a not an attack on capitalism, but showing what was wrong with capitalism monopolies. So I kind of thought that was interesting. The other thing that there on this particular page was there's a couple things. They can influence how we think of and see the world for better or worse. As such, games are a window into the beliefs and habits of the people who play them. By examining our relationships with games throughout history, we can better understand the beliefs of peoples long past and more clearly see our own. I think there's a lot of good points in there. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can look at through cultures. And one of the when you're studying different cultures throughout time, there's a couple big things that kind of always pop up. Most cultures have some type of religion, and most cultures had some type of, obviously language forms of communication, but also games. And something I didn't know, what she talks about in here is games are older than the written language, which for me that was kind of pretty profound to think about. That there's games that are older than the written language, but that does kind of make sense because, even if you look at animals in the animal kingdom, you can see that they're playing games as well. Let's go ahead and take another sip. One of the other things that I saw in here that the author does much, much better than I'm going to articulate was, but I think it's very true. Games have been a powerful generator of knowledge. Their contemplation gave rise to probability theory and modern economic thought, as well as new ideas in moral philosophy and artificial intelligence. I don't think people truly understand how much games have impacted the world that we live in. And this is one, again, if you like games, if you like history, if you're wondering what's going on with the AI and different things, I can't highly recommend enough, read this book. There are so much cool and interesting things in here that even for somebody, a nerd like me who reads a lot, plays a lot of games, and knows a little bit about everything. I've often been called the Cliff Clavin of our nerd circle. So for any of those that are fans of the show Cheers, you'll know what I talk about with the Cliff Clavin thing. It's not usually a compliment. And then she kind of goes into talks about dopamine, which and how it goes with gaming. But this is something that you'll want to kind of read about. I'll skip ahead. That's something else that I went back and highlighted was language replaces direct experience. It can be used to synthesize previous experience and install in our minds at scale beliefs that inform appropriate choices. An accurate belief may be reinforced. A hunter might use the correct knowledge of wildlife habitats to feed the family, for instance, but beliefs can also be reinforced by social rewards, as with the propagation of conspiracy theories in the insular online communities. It doesn't matter if these beliefs are accurate. They are reinforced by social inclusion and the gamified social network feedback of likes. This is something that I actually had a long conversation with a friend it wasn't today, I think it was the other day, about, again, whatever your political views are, left, right, I think a lot of us can agree on, we all have friends and family, know people that have gone to the extremes on both sides. And one of the questions that came up with is, why have we gone so much to the extremes on both sides rather than in the middle? And I think it's hard to argue that social media and technology has amplified that. And I think part of that is it's amplified that feedback loop and, having somebody like and reinforce that. And I do think that, in a weird sense, it's like an addictive thing where if I spout something that my family and friends always said I was, crazy about, but I go online and I'm spouting and talking about the same thing, and then I've got 1,000 people saying, "Oh, you're right. This is great." Now you found that community, you found that like-minded people, and they're reinforcing what you're saying and you're reinforcing what they're saying, and you kind of get like a little high, when they're liking your comments and you're liking theirs, and it goes back and forth. You would have to read the book and I'm sure watch interviews and read other work from the author to see if that's, you know, the point they're trying to make. But this is something that when I read, and I was talking about it with a friend who I told, hey man, you got to go buy this book. I thought it was kind of, you know, it was definitely a good conversation about has social media. And I think, again, I think it's hard to dispute this. And yes, I get the irony. I'm talking about this on a YouTube, you know, when I post this, that goes to the algorithms, that it's gamifying the likes and feedbacks, and it kind of goes in, you know, so there's a lot of conversation in here about dopamine and that kind of hit you get when somebody likes something. And I thought this was very interesting, as diverse rewards, food, sex, money, social belonging, drugs elicit similar responses to dopamine neurons. Addictive drugs like cocaine short-circuit the learning system. These drugs reinforce drug-seeking behavior by increasing dopamine levels. Technology companies exploit the same principle to enthrall users to their platforms and using reinforcement mechanisms like novelty and social status. This is something that, you know, it's definitely hit home, especially over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. It's hard to argue that. It's hard to argue, and I've seen people do this. I've seen people who spouted for years that you shouldn't be glued to the TV, that you shouldn't be glued to video games, that you shouldn't be online. And then, you know, in the last couple of years, they'll spend all their time online in different groups talking about different kind of theories. And it's kind of like they get in this rabbit hole and they go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I do think it's into this. I think there's an addictive quality to it. And I think it's hard to argue that there's not an addictive quality to it. And I think, you know, it's one of those things that we should all be very aware of and cognizant of, especially as our politics seem to be going more to the extremes on both sides. Let me go ahead and take a quick drink. And I have no idea of the politics of this author. So I'm not reading this with, is there a left slant, a right slant? You know, I'm not. Like, all books I read, I'm reading it. I usually read books. Every book I've ever read, I'll read 3 times. I'll read it once just for the pure enjoyment of reading it. I'll read it a second time because once I've read it, I'm not trying to figure out what's going on next. And I feel like I can pick up on stuff that I missed the first time. And then the third time I read a book, I'll read it with the intent of, what is the author trying to say? Where are they coming from? But at that point, I've done some research on the author to have a better perspective. And I guess I know that makes me a nerd. And, you know, I haven't met very many people that'll read the same book 3 times for those reasons. But, you know, I'm also doing a YouTube channel where I talk about whiskey, games, and nerd stuff. She then goes on to talks about how, you know, today people have died during gameplay, and a handful of children have died from neglect by their game-addicted parents. You know, and obviously that is something that's extremely sad. I think it's not the game, it's that addiction gene, right? So I think these people, these children, or children throughout the world that are being neglected, I think those same parents would have probably neglected them from drugs, from other things. It wasn't the games. I think there was something in their lives that, you know, triggered some addictive gene. I kind of thought this was interesting. Problematic gamers make up around 1% of the global population, and about 3% of the global population are problematic gamers. People who have uncontrollable urges to play video games. For comparison, alcoholism affects 1.4% of the people worldwide, and opioid addiction about 2% globally. So you've got 1% of the global population, problematic gamblers make up 1%, and 3% are problematic gamers. So I am of the opinion that this is more of an addictive gene and what's going on in those people's lives than it is any particular, it's not the video games and it's not the games itself. Let's go ahead and take a sip. So I'm going to stop here. I've gone through and highlighted a lot of sections of this book. But I kind of wanted to take this in chunks because, again, as anybody who's actually listened to some of my videos through, there's a couple of things I always like to point out. I don't do a lot of editing, so I'm not doing 4 or 5 takes of this and doing the perfect take. What you get is the first take. I will pause it sometimes as somebody walks in the room, or I lose a train of thought because I've got ADD and I hear a noise or something, or I need to refresh a drink. Let's go ahead and take another one. So what you're getting when I'm talking about stuff is the raw, here's what I'm thinking. I know that if I sat down, wrote out my thoughts, did a well-articulated thought, and went through it, I could talk about this in probably a more entertaining and delightful manner. But I do think there's something genuine about just kind of talking about stuff. Usually what I'll do is I'll record the video. I listen to it one time just to make sure I don't say anything really dumb, or I don't got the cat running in the background or the kids yelling or something like that. Or I, like I've done sometimes, left the TV on in the background when you don't want to hear a TV program. But this is kind of just general stuff. Now, this is, again, the other thing I talk about a lot is, I don't get into the politics or where people are with this. If I like something, I'm going to talk about it. If I like a book, I'm going to talk about it. If I like a drink, I'm going to talk about it. If I like something really nerdy, I'm going to talk about it. I've got a couple of things I'll be talking about, and I jump around. Comic books, these books, Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood, Legos, random stuff that I get, I'm going to talk about. So, with that said, I would really, really encourage anybody to read this book. I think there are some really cool things in here. I would love to have a conversation with the author. Just from reading the jacket and what I've read of the book so far, she's far beyond anything that I'm going to be as far as understanding what she's talking about. But I think there's some really fascinating, cool stuff in here. And I've already had multiple conversations with several friends about some of the stuff. We get into the whole thing about Pascal's wager, that I had an hour-long conversation with a friend about it, and kind of just how that tied into game theory. I would love to hear some comments on, have you read this book? Do you find the book interesting? What did you like? What did you not like? And then other similar books that you would recommend to the whiskey, game, and nerd stuff community. Also would like to hear your thoughts on these little nice, easy, old-fashioned mixes, which I'm going to go ahead and refill and go ahead and drink the rest of that. I really do appreciate everybody who watches these videos. With the filming of this particular video, I think I'm about a little more than 200 subscribers short of 10,000, which I never would have thought I would get close to that. So I sincerely appreciate every like, subscriber. Highly encourage you to comment. I try and actually I think I do respond to. I've responded to every comment, every email. Really do appreciate it. Also would love to hear any advice on things that I can do better. Yes, I still know that I need to get a better camera and better microphone. I'm still going with the original, cheaper ones, but I told myself if I can hit 10,000 subscribers, what I'll do is I'll go buy a nice expensive bottle of whiskey and actually go buy some equipment and maybe even buy a software that doesn't come with the computer. Right now, the editing software that I'm using is the free version that came with the laptop. Again, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to watch this. Please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, everybody, cheers.